Imagine coming home early, only to uncover a web of betrayal that shatters decades of trust. When Chris walked into his own home that afternoon, he wasn't just catching a cheating spouse. He was unraveling a sinister plan that would change everything. What unfolded next wasn't just a confrontation. It was a masterclass in retribution. Brace yourself for a tale of deceit, shocking revelations, and ultimate justice. I was sitting at the kitchen table when a beautiful woman, walked in, their expression quickly shifting from surprise to irritation as their brain caught up with the reality of me being home at 3:30 in the afternoon, a time they probably thought was theirs to play with. They were stunning as always, a striking 5'10" in professional attire, with auburn hair brushing their shoulders. Today's choice of attire, a white blouse with one too many buttons undone, and a black skirt that hugged their hips, was a little too intentional for someone heading home from work. They didn't come in alone. Behind them, a tall, younger individual stepped in awkwardly, trying to stay in their shadow. I noticed how they subtly shifted their body to shield the newcomer, like a magician hoping their audience wouldn't notice them pulling the strings. "What are you doing home?" they started, their voice clipped. I tilted my head, pretending to ponder their absurd question. "I live here." Their irritation flashed, as it had so often these past weeks. "Of course you live here, but why are you home at this hour?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I let my eyes sweep over them and their guest. The guest was holding a leather briefcase, looking like they wanted to be anywhere but here. Their nervous posture betrayed them, but their face, especially their eyes, told me they weren't stupid. "I guess I could ask you the same thing," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "You're home 2.5 hours early." The corners of their mouth twitched, but they quickly masked it. "We came to talk to you," they said carefully. "We?" My gaze shifted to their guest. They took a step forward, extending a hand as if they were at a networking event. "Sir," they said, "I'm an attorney at a firm, and I've been working closely with them over the past few months." I ignored the extended hand, letting the silence hang. I wanted them to squirm, and they didn't disappoint. The individual shifted on their heels, and the guest dropped their arm, trying to mask their discomfort with a forced smile. "Don't be rude," they said sharply, their voice clipped. "Rude?" I smiled thinly. "I'm sorry. Did I interrupt something?" The guest's eyes darted between them and me. This wasn't going how they had planned, and they both knew it. I kept my smile in place, leaning back in my chair. "Why don't I grab us some drinks?" I said suddenly. "Let's sit in the living room and talk." They looked unsure, their calculating mind clearly spinning, but the guest, eager to regain some control, nodded. "That sounds good." A few minutes later, we were seated in the living room. They and the guest had taken the couch, sitting closer than was appropriate for colleagues. I handed them a glass of their favorite drink, poured the guest a tulip glass of amber ale, and kept a short pour of bourbon for myself. As I raised my glass in a mock toast, the guest tried to make polite conversation. "This is a fantastic amber ale," they said, swirling the glass and inspecting the bubbles. "One of the most complex I've had." "What brewery is this from?" I smirked. "Pabst Blue Ribbon." Their brows furrowed, and the guest froze mid-sip. "You've always said PBR is worse than donkey piss," they said exasperatedly. I didn't bother hiding my grin. "And I stand by that." The guest's smile cracked, and they lost what little patience they had left. "You're being such an," they snapped. "We came home to have a calm, mature conversation, but you've been nothing but rude and condescending." "Rude?" I leaned back in the armchair, twirling the bourbon in my glass. Maybe I need to learn from the experts on polite, uplifting conversations, like my ever-faithful partner. I gave them a pointed look, and they had the decency to avoid my gaze. The guest decided it was their turn to step in. "Sir," I interrupted, my voice like steel. "When you walked into my home, you called me sir. Let's stick with that." They flushed, but to their credit, they didn't back down. "Sir," they started again, "we came here today to talk about the situation calmly." "The situation," I repeated dryly, swirling my bourbon. "Right. Why don't you enlighten me about the situation?" The guest glanced at them, seeking permission to proceed. They nodded subtly, and the guest forged ahead. "This is just a short-term mistake. I regret leading anyone into this situation, and I take full responsibility for my role. We both agree that this doesn't change the bond you share. It's temporary." I laughed, genuinely amused by their delivery. "A mistake, huh? That's what you're calling it?" I turned my gaze toward them. "Is that what this is to you? A mistake?" They leaned forward, resting their elbows on their knees, trying to look earnest. "It's nothing. Just a distraction. I love you. I don't want a divorce." My smile faded, replaced with a cold, piercing look. "A distraction," I repeated, my voice like ice. "We've been together for over 2 decades, built a life, a family, and now I find out the person I've devoted my life to calls it a distraction." They flinched, but held their ground. "I've been lonely," they began, their voice trembling. "It's not an excuse, but you've been so busy with work. And after everything with... Don't you dare drag anyone else into this mess," I snapped, cutting them off. "This isn't about me being busy or any other excuse you've concocted. This is about you making the choice to betray everything we've built together." The guest tried to interject, their voice trembling. "Sir, shut the hell up," I barked, silencing them instantly. "I'm talking to my partner." They looked down, their composure cracking. "It's over," they said softly. "After this weekend, everything ends. It was just a mistake, something I regret deeply. Please, let's move forward." I let the words hang in the air for a long moment, staring at them as the weight of their betrayal settled over me. Slowly, I stood and walked to the sideboard, pretending to refill my glass, though it was still nearly full. When I turned back, I saw their anxiety in the stiff set of their shoulders, the tight grip on their glass, and the silent desperation in their eyes. The guest looked equally uneasy, shifting uncomfortably on the couch. "You've got guts," I said finally, my voice devoid of emotion. "I'll give you that, but guts won't save you now." I pulled a remote from my pocket and aimed it at the TV. The screen flickered to life, revealing the faces of 2 familiar individuals. One, a trusted family attorney, and the other, a divorce lawyer I'd hired weeks ago. "Good evening," I said, addressing the screen. "Are we ready to begin?" "Ready when you are," one of the attorneys replied, their tone calm and professional. Their face drained of color as they realized what was happening. What? What is this?" "This," I said coldly, "is the beginning of the end. Would you like the next section to detail the legal consequences unfolding, or focus on the emotional responses of the characters?" The family attorney, Peter, adjusted his glasses and spoke in a firm, steady voice. "Mrs. Carter, my role in these proceedings is to ensure clarity and transparency. Earlier this afternoon, divorce papers were officially filed on behalf of Mr. Carter. Grounds: infidelity supported by substantial evidence. They gasped, their face going pale as they glanced at me, then back at the screen. Lou, the divorce attorney, picked up seamlessly. Mrs. Carter, the prenuptial agreement you signed nearly 3 decades ago remains valid. Every 2 years, Mr. Carter has ensured its compliance with current laws. Under its terms, Mr. Carter retains the house, all savings and retirement accounts, and 80% of liquid assets. You'll leave with your personal belongings and 20% of joint cash reserves. The words hit like a thunderclap. They opened their mouth to argue, but no words came out. Lou continued, his tone merciless. Additionally, your employment at Carter Insurance Brokerage will be terminated effective tomorrow morning. You'll receive severance equivalent to 2 months' salary. As of this moment, all joint accounts have been frozen. You'll need to retain your own counsel moving forward. Their breath hitched and tears welled in their eyes. You can't do this, they whispered, their voice trembling. I sipped my bourbon, my face impassive. Oh, but I already have. The guest finally spoke up, his voice shaky. This doesn't have to escalate, Mr. Carter. Surely we can come to a more amicable. I silenced him with a sharp look. Amicable. You walk into my house, into my life, destroy my marriage, and think you're in a position to negotiate. Sit down and stay quiet. I'm not finished. I turned back to the screen, where Peter leaned forward slightly. Chris, would you like me to outline the next steps? I shook my head. Not yet. There's one more call to make. I clicked the remote again, and the screen changed. A new face appeared. Jake, the CEO of their company. Chris, Jake said, his expression grim. I've reviewed everything you sent me. This isn't easy, but given the circumstances, I have no choice. He turned his gaze to my partner. Effective immediately, your position in Hartford is eliminated. Given your tenure, I'm offering a lateral transfer to Albany. You have 1 week to decide, and 30 days to relocate if you accept. They shot to their feet. Jake, please. This is my career, my life's work. You can't do this to me. Jake's voice was cold and unyielding. You did this to yourself. I expect your decision by Monday. The screen went dark. The guest stood abruptly, his fists clenched. You're destroying her life, you bastard. I moved quickly, pulling a pistol from the side drawer and pointing it directly at him. Sit down. Now. He froze, his rage giving way to fear. Slowly, he lowered himself back onto the couch, his hands trembling. I set the gun down within reach and pressed the remote again. The final call connected. My daughter's face appeared on the screen, her expression a mix of sadness and disappointment. Hi, Dad, she said softly. Hi, sweetheart, I replied, my voice gentler now. Kelly, they began, their voice breaking. Please, let me explain. Kelly held up a hand, silencing them. I've heard enough, Mom. Your affair, your betrayal, your plans to run off. It's disgusting. I can't believe you would do this to Dad, to our family. It's not that simple, they pleaded. You don't understand. Oh, I understand perfectly. Kelly interrupted, her voice steady but cold. You've destroyed everything. And by the way, Scott and I are having a baby, a girl. She's due in February, but you won't be part of her life. I can't trust you anymore. Tears streamed down their face as Kelly's image disappeared from the screen. I stood, tucking the pistol into my waistband. I'm heading out for dinner. When I get back, I expect you to be gone. Pack what you need for a week. I turned to the guest, my eyes narrowing. You have 3 days to leave the state. If I find you here on Monday, you'll regret it." Without another word, I walked to the door, pausing only to glance back at the shattered remnants of their plan. "Enjoy your weekend in New York," I said, my voice dripping with contempt. "I hear the weather's going to be beautiful," and with that, I walked out, leaving them to sit in the wreckage of their choices. As the door slammed behind me, I stepped out into the crisp night air. The sound of crickets filled the silence, a sharp contrast to the storm I'd left inside. The weight of the past few hours settled over me, but it wasn't heaviness. It was relief. For years, I had been blind to the cracks forming in my life, ignoring the signs, dismissing the red flags. Tonight wasn't just about justice. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my future, and my peace of mind. I got into my car, the leather seat cool against my back, and started the engine. The low hum was a soothing reminder that I was in control now. I had orchestrated this evening down to the smallest detail, ensuring there would be no loose ends. I drove for miles, the city lights fading into the distance as I headed to the one place that always brought me clarity, the cabin by the lake. The secluded retreat was where I could think, breathe, and plan my next steps. When I arrived, the lake's surface mirrored the moonlight, serene and undisturbed. I stepped out, took a deep breath, and let the tranquility wash over me. The world felt quiet again, like it was finally giving me permission to start over. Inside the cabin, I poured myself another drink and sank into the old armchair by the fireplace. The flames danced, their warmth a stark contrast to the coldness I had shown earlier. But there was no guilt, only resolution. Tomorrow I would meet with my legal team to finalize everything. By next week my life would be a clean slate, free of deceit and betrayal. I would rebuild not just my home, but myself. As I stared into the fire, my phone buzzed on the table beside me. It was a message from Kelly. "Proud of you, Dad. We'll get through this together." A small smile tugged at the corner of my lips. Yes, we would. I raised my glass in a silent toast to new beginnings, to lessons learned, and to the life I deserved. And as the fire crackled softly, I allowed myself to hope again. The storm had passed. It was time to move forward. The cabin became a cocoon of solace over the next few days. I woke to the sound of birdsong, the rustling of leaves in the breeze, and the occasional ripple on the lake's surface. For the first time in years, I felt no urgency to check my phone, answer an email, or placate someone else's demands. This was my time, my moment to rediscover who I was outside of all the chaos. Kelly called the day after I arrived. Hearing her voice brought an unexpected lump to my throat. She didn't ask questions or pry into details. Instead, she told me about her pregnancy, how excited Scott was to become a father, and how much she wanted me to be part of her daughter's life. "Dad," she said softly, "you're going to be an amazing grandfather. She's going to need someone strong, someone who'll teach her about love, respect, and resilience. That's you." Her words grounded me. For so long I'd been defined by my role as a husband, a provider, and a father. Now I had the chance to redefine those roles on my terms. My bond with Kelly remained unshaken, and the promise of a grandchild was a beacon of hope for the future. Back at the cabin, I spent hours journaling, organizing my thoughts, and mapping out what life would look like moving forward. I'd already secured the best lawyers to handle the divorce. Sandrella's betrayal had been devastating, but I'd ensured the fallout would be manageable for me. The prenup and years of careful planning had protected everything that mattered. Now, it was time to focus on what came next. A week later, I returned to the city, stepping back into my home, now devoid of Sandrella's presence. The silence was comforting rather than eerie. Her belongings were gone, and with them, the remnants of her deceit. The house felt lighter, freer. It was no longer a place of shared memories tainted by lies, but a blank canvas waiting to be filled with new, authentic moments. I called Kelly that evening to tell her I'd be visiting soon. I wanted to help with the nursery, see the ultrasound photos she'd mentioned, and start building the bridge to our next chapter as a family. She sounded excited, her joy spilling through the phone, like sunlight breaking through clouds. Over the following months, I threw myself into new pursuits, reconnecting with old friends, rediscovering hobbies I'd neglected, and even volunteering at a local youth mentorship program. Helping others find their path felt therapeutic, a reminder that even in the face of betrayal and loss, there was always a way forward. Sandrella reached out once, her tone apologetic and remorseful. I listened, but offered no promises of forgiveness. Some bridges, I realized, are better left burned. Michael, as far as I knew, had left town, his life as shattered as the illusions he'd built around himself. When February arrived, so did Kelly's daughter, a beautiful, healthy baby girl with Scott's dark hair and Kelly's bright eyes. Holding her for the first time was transformative. She looked up at me with a kind of innocent curiosity, completely unaware of the storm her family had weathered to welcome her into the world. In that moment, I made a silent vow to be the kind of grandfather she could always depend on, a steady presence of love and strength. Life wasn't perfect, it rarely is, but it was honest, and that was enough. I had learned the value of resilience, the importance of self-respect, and the power of letting go. As I stood on the lake's edge months later, watching my granddaughter toddle through the grass, with Kelly close behind, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. The past was behind me, and the future was wide open, waiting to be written. Sometimes betrayal paves the way for liberation. Chris didn't just survive the storm. He turned it into a weapon to reclaim his life. What would you do in his shoes? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that keep you on the edge of your seat. The truth has a way of coming out, and when it does, justice follows. Until the next time,